The faint scrape of a metal tool against my door froze me in place, my hand still gripping the car's steering wheel. Still, I didn't move, my breath steady as my gaze fixed on them. My son, my daughter-in-law, working together to break into my house. As the scent of fresh-cut grass wafted in through the window, I felt something shift inside me. While they thought they had time, I knew they had miscalculated. The same familiar betrayal. But now, my response would be different. That's when I understood. This wasn't about reclaiming what's mine. It was about taking back control. It was over. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn stepped off the plane, the weight of the long delays heavy on her. It had been a frustrating day. Weather-related cancellations, waiting, delays. But she'd kept herself composed. Even if everything had been a hassle, she refused to let it show. A part of her had hoped to get a hotel room and rest before returning home. But after everything, she couldn't bear the thought of being somewhere unfamiliar, surrounded by noise and strangers. No, she needed to be back in the quiet of her own home, familiar and secure. The drive back was uneventful, the streets of Charlotte passing by in a blur. The humid summer night clung to her car as she navigated the oak-lined roads of her suburban neighborhood. She felt a strange sense of calm, her hands on the wheel steady, as the familiar landscape unfolded before her. When she turned onto her street, something shifted. Her headlights cut through the darkness, and she noticed movement near her porch. A flicker of shadows that seemed out of place. At first, she thought it was the wind moving the branches of the trees, but as she neared her home, she saw it more clearly. Two figures stood at her front door. She slowed the car, her heart skipping a beat. The figures were too still, too focused. She squinted, trying to make out details. Joel, her son. He was crouching near the door, working at something with a small metallic tool in hand. And beside him, Holly, his wife. Standing too close, her voice a low whisper, urgent. Hurry. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't move. She just watched. Her breath was steady, calm, but her mind was already racing. They hadn't expected her home this early. They thought they had time to get inside, to do whatever they planned without anyone noticing. But they had made a mistake. Joel worked with growing frustration, trying to force the lock open. His back was to her now, but his movements were tense. Holly was scanning the street, her body stiff, like she was expecting someone, anyone, to come down the road. Evelyn's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She could feel the anger rising, but she didn't let it consume her. Not yet. She was still composed, still in control. Her mind worked quickly, calculating her next steps. They hadn't seen her yet. She wasn't ready to reveal herself. Not yet. A movement caught her attention from the corner of her eye. Frank, her neighbor. He had stepped out of his house, drawn by the commotion. His figure appeared in the dim light, watching the scene unfold. Evelyn? Frank's voice was low, hesitant. He knew something was off. He must have seen it too, the way Joel and Holly were acting, the way they were trying to break into her house. But he said nothing more, just stood there, his expression unreadable. Evelyn stayed in the car, watching, waiting. Her mind was already one step ahead. Frank would be a witness. Frank would be on her side. But the real plan was already set in motion. They thought they had time, but they didn't. She would make them regret underestimating her. With a slow exhale, she turned the key in the ignition. She wasn't leaving the car just yet. Not when they still had no idea she was here. Let them continue their desperate work. She let them dig their own grave. It would only take a moment. And by sunrise, everything would change. Evelyn watched as Joel froze, his head snapping toward the car. His eyes widened, and his hand faltered on the lock-picking kit. Holly stood next to him, her body stiffening as she turned to follow his gaze. For a moment there was only silence, thick with the weight of their realization. They hadn't seen her. Not until now. Evelyn's grip on the car door tightened, but she didn't move. Her heart beat steadily, her mind as clear as ever. She could feel the tension between them, the panic beginning to ripple outward from Joel and Holly, but she remained calm, composed. She had been waiting for this moment. The moment they would finally know they were caught. Joel was the first to recover, stumbling over his words. "Mom. Evelyn? We were just checking on the house," he said quickly, his voice rising in pitch. "You know, just making sure everything's all right while you were away." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She simply watched them, her face an unreadable mask. Her phone was already in her hand, the screen quietly recording their every move. No words were necessary. The evidence was being captured in real time. Holly's eyes darted to Joel, then back to Evelyn. Her face flushed, and she stepped forward, attempting to force a smile. "It's not what you think, Evelyn," she said, her voice trying to sound casual, but the edge of panic was evident. "We—" Evelyn took a slow step out of the car, her movements deliberate, measured. She kept her eyes fixed on them, making no attempt to mask her quiet confidence. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and she could almost hear the tension crackling between her son and daughter-in-law. Frank appeared from next door, his weathered face emerging from the shadows as he walked toward them. His eyes flicking between the scene at the door and Evelyn. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Evelyn gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, her expression calm. "I'm fine, Frank," she replied softly. He glanced at her for a moment longer, then looked back at Joel and Holly, his expression becoming unreadable. Joel shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking between Frank and Evelyn. "It's all a misunderstanding," he said, his voice tight. "We're family. We were just checking on things. You know, after the flight." Evelyn didn't respond. She simply tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to let him know she wasn't buying it. The silence stretched, and Joel's words seemed to lose all power in the air. Holly moved again, her eyes darting around nervously, but Evelyn kept her focus sharp. The panic was spreading, and she knew they were running out of time. They didn't have the luxury of excuses anymore. Without a word, Evelyn reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing over the phone in her hand. The screen flickered to life, and she pressed record with a quiet, practiced motion. Joel noticed the phone just as it started, his face flickering with a flash of realization. "Mom?" He started again, his voice desperate. "You can't. This is—" "You should have thought of that before," Evelyn interrupted, her voice cold and steady. Her eyes never left Joel's, and she could see the fight draining from him, replaced by an uncomfortable sense of guilt he could no longer hide. Holly's face twisted in frustration, but there was nothing she could say. Evelyn knew they had no way out. They thought they had time. They thought they could get away with it. But they hadn't counted on her. Frank stayed silent, watching the exchange with quiet understanding. He knew enough to see what was happening here. He stepped back, giving them space, but his eyes never left the scene. Joel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Holly's face was pale and her hands trembled at her sides. The game had changed. Evelyn stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "It's over," she said simply, and the finality of her words hit the air like a closing door. The moment stretched, but Evelyn didn't flinch. Not for them, not for anyone. And as the weight of the truth settled in, she knew. By sunrise, everything would change. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the screen of her laptop glowing in the dim light. Frank stood beside her, his expression unreadable. The air felt thick with the weight of what had just happened, but Evelyn's mind was already on the next step. She clicked through the doorbell camera's interface, her fingers steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her head. The footage flickered to life, grainy but clear enough. Joel and Holly were there, right where she had left them. She focused on the timestamp, the moment they thought they were out of view. Joel fumbled with the lock, frustration pulling at his features. Holly hovered nearby, her face tense. Then came the whisper, "Grab what matters first." The words hit Evelyn like a cold wave. Her grip on the mouse tightened, but she didn't react. This was it. The proof she needed. The moment they'd sealed their fate. She sat back, letting the video roll, her focus unbroken. Frank watched the screen, his face hardening as the footage continued. The forced entry was clear. Joel yanking at the door with all his strength, Holly glancing nervously around as if waiting for someone to appear. The silence in the room stretched between them like a chasm. Frank spoke first, his voice low. "You need to call the police, Evelyn. This isn't something you can let slide." Evelyn exhaled slowly, her mind sharp and focused. She clicked through the footage again, pausing at the moment the lock snapped open, the timestamp glaring back at her. She printed out still images, each one a damning record of their attempt. The printer hummed softly, and the first page slid out. Joel's face twisted in frustration, Holly looking over her shoulder as if she could will the world to disappear. Evelyn set the printout aside, her expression unreadable. "You were right," she said to Frank, her voice steady. "It's time to make this official." Frank stepped back slightly, as if giving her space. He didn't argue. They both knew what needed to be done. Evelyn reached for her phone, dialing Dana's emergency line with swift, practiced fingers. The phone rang twice before Dana picked up. "Evelyn?" Dana's voice was sharp, professional. "What's going on?" "I need a property consult," Evelyn replied. Her tone was calm, but there was an underlying edge to it. "Now." Dana hesitated. "I'm on my way. Don't speak to anyone. Get everything you've got ready." Evelyn nodded, even though Dana couldn't see her. She hung up, her gaze returning to the printouts, each page a reminder of what had just occurred. It wasn't just about the stolen items, or the betrayal. It was about control. Her control. Frank's voice cut through the silence again. "Are you sure about this?" Evelyn didn't look up. She didn't need to. "This isn't about being sure," she said quietly, her hands moving to gather the printouts. "It's about doing what needs to be done." She stood, the weight of the next step settling heavily on her shoulders. The evidence was in her hands. She had the proof. And now she would make sure Joel and Holly paid the price. The door clicked shut behind her as she stepped out, ready to set everything in motion. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the stack of printouts as she walked through the door of Dana's office. The cool, sterile air inside the building was a sharp contrast to the warmth of the summer evening still clinging to her skin. She walked briskly, her heels clicking against the polished floors, every step an anchor in her resolve. Dana's assistant greeted her with a polite smile, but Evelyn barely registered the woman's words. She was already in motion, heading toward Dana's office at the back of the suite. The door opened with a quiet push, and Dana looked up from her desk. The sharp lines of her office were as immaculate as ever, clean, organized, professional. And the tension in the air was palpable, as if Dana already sensed what was to come. "I've got everything," Evelyn said flatly, her voice steady but laced with something else, something colder. Dana's eyes flicked to the stack of documents in Evelyn's hand, her brow furrowing slightly. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Sit down," she said, her tone professional but now laced with urgency. Evelyn set the papers down with deliberate care, and Dana immediately began flipping through the printouts. She scanned the images, Still shots from the doorbell camera, clear as day, of Joel and Holly attempting to break into the house. The timestamp on each one was a glaring reminder of their intentions. "This is airtight evidence," Dana muttered under her breath, her fingers hovering over the pages. "You have them, Evelyn. This is a complete admission of intent." Evelyn didn't respond immediately, her eyes fixed on the pile of evidence in front of them. This wasn't about the stolen items anymore. This was about something deeper. Her son and his wife had crossed a line, one that couldn't be undone. Not anymore. And Evelyn wasn't going to let it go. Dana paused, the wheels turning in her mind. "We need to move fast. With this," she gestured to the stack of documents. "We can charge them with attempted unlawful entry. If we want to go further, we can also pursue a case for theft, though that may require more evidence." Evelyn let out a long breath, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't care about their excuses anymore. They had a plan. They thought they could just waltz in and take what wasn't theirs. It ends here." Dana nodded, making notes on her pad. "I agree. I'll need to contact the police as soon as possible. We'll file an official report. And with the video and these photographs, there's no question they were trying to break in." Frank, who had accompanied Evelyn to the office, stepped forward then, his face grim. "I'll sign a witness statement. I saw them, and I'll attest to what happened." Dana looked up at Frank, nodding. "That will be crucial. You're a reliable witness. Your testimony will strengthen the case." Frank sat down, pulling out his own notepad and scribbling a few lines. He was steady, deliberate in his movements. Evelyn had always appreciated his calmness. He'd been the one to help her through difficult times. This one, no different. Evelyn crossed her arms, her gaze shifting between Dana and Frank. "I've put up with a lot from Joel and Holly over the years," she said, her voice growing colder. "Years of boundary violations, years of them trying to take what's mine. At first I thought I could let it go. But this was the last straw." Dana's eyes softened, but she didn't say anything. She knew better than to interrupt. Evelyn wasn't speaking from a place of anger. She was speaking from a place of finality. "I've kept track of everything," Evelyn continued. "Every instance where they tried to push me, take what was mine, whether it was asking for money, trying to get access to my accounts, or—" She paused. "The constant pressure to change my will. It's been years of this, Dana, but I didn't realize how far they were willing to go." Dana scribbled a few more notes, the sharp click of her pen echoing in the quiet room. "It's good you've been keeping records. This will make everything easier when it comes time to finalize the restraining order." Evelyn nodded, a small, resolute smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I want them out of my life for good. I've already made changes. I'm not letting them do this anymore." Dana set her pen down and met Evelyn's gaze. "I'll begin drafting the restraining orders immediately, and we'll file the ownership updates as soon as possible. If you're ready, we can move forward today." Evelyn stood up, her back straight. She was ready. More than ready. As she turned to leave, Dana's voice followed her. "I'll take care of the legal details, Evelyn. This is just the beginning. But you're doing the right thing." The door clicked shut behind her, and Evelyn exhaled a slow breath, her gaze fixed ahead, unwavering. The wheels were in motion now. There was no turning back. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the pen, her hand trembling slightly. The papers in front of her were more than just words. They were the line in the sand, the final act that would sever ties with her son, Joel, and his wife Holly. Dana sat across from her, a quiet force of calm in the tense space. Frank stood by her side, as ever, his presence steady. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The weight of the moment was enough. Evelyn looked at the documents before her, the new trust papers that would strip Joel of his inheritance and exclude Holly from any future claim. The decision felt monumental, but she had long prepared for it. Her chest tightened as she picked up the pen. It was now or never. With deliberate care, Evelyn signed. The pen moved smoothly across the page, and with each stroke, she could feel a shift, one that had been a long time coming. Joel was gone from her life. Holly was barred from everything Evelyn had built. This wasn't just about money. This was about control, about taking back what they had tried to steal. When the last signature was in place, Evelyn placed the pen down with a quiet exhale. The finality of it settled in the room like a weight. Frank stepped forward, taking the documents with the practiced hand of someone who had done this countless times before. He stamped them, the press of the notary marking the moment with the cold certainty of the law. There was no celebration, no triumph, just the simple, unyielding reality of the decision. Evelyn watched the papers being filed into a manila folder, the crisp edges of each page echoing in the quiet room. Her heart was steady. She didn't feel any rush of victory or relief, just an empty, exhausted sense of finality. She picked up her phone, scrolling to the footage she had saved, the video from the doorbell camera. It was time to make it official. With one swift motion, she forwarded the video to the police with a simple note. Attempted unlawful entry. Please see attached footage. The message sent, and she felt the weight of it. There was no more hiding. There was no more playing games. Dana stood up, her heels clicking against the floor. I'll file these restraining orders tomorrow. They won't be able to get near you again, Evelyn. Evelyn nodded but didn't speak. The actions spoke louder than any words. The legal walls were closing in on Joel and Holly, and there was no escape for them now. She had done what needed to be done. Frank looked at her, his face filled with a quiet understanding. He moved to take the notarized papers, securing them into a folder. I'll make sure everything is in order, he said. You've made the right choice. Evelyn didn't respond. Her thoughts focused on the final step, securing the deed in the private trust. She would make sure no one could touch it. Not Joel, not Holly. No one. With one last glance at Frank and Dana, Evelyn turned and made her way to the door. She didn't look back. She had closed the chapter, and there was no need to revisit it. When she reached the door, Dana's voice stopped her. I'll handle everything from here. Just focus on moving forward. Evelyn's hand rested on the door, but she didn't open it just yet. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice steady. I'm done. And with that, she stepped into the future. The past was behind her now. Evelyn stared at her phone, the screen glowing in the dim light. Joel's name appeared at the top of the message she had been waiting for but never wanted to see. A part of her wanted to reach out, to ask him why, to demand an explanation for everything that had happened. But the silence between them was already deafening, and she knew it was far too late for any more words. Her thumb hovered over the message for a moment, then she tapped the screen with a calmness that surprised her. Block. The notification disappeared instantly. The decision was made, and Evelyn felt the weight of it settle deep in her chest. She wouldn't respond. She wouldn't even let him try to weasel his way back in. This time, there was no room for manipulation, no more chances for excuses. He had crossed a line, and this was her line in the sand. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Joel. It was Dana, confirming that the restraining orders would be filed by morning. Evelyn allowed herself a small exhale, a sense of accomplishment flooding through her, one step closer. She pushed the phone aside and glanced at Frank. He had been quiet ever since they left Dana's office, but Evelyn could tell he was keeping an eye on her. His concern wasn't obvious, but it was there, silent, unspoken. He knew how much this hurt. How do you feel? Frank asked, his voice low, careful. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She wasn't sure she could put the feeling into words. There was a dull ache in her chest, the kind that always followed a hard decision. I feel Like I did what needed to be done, she finally said, her voice steady. Frank nodded. He had seen Evelyn make difficult decisions before, but this one felt heavier. He understood why it had to be done, but that didn't mean it was easy. Joel's not going to take this well, Frank said, stating the obvious. And Holly, she'll twist it any way she can. I know, Evelyn replied, her tone quiet but resolute. But this isn't about them anymore. It's about what I've built. What's mine. Frank didn't argue. He knew how deeply Evelyn valued her independence, her sense of security. Joel and Holly had spent years pushing boundaries, manipulating, trying to take what wasn't theirs. But Evelyn wasn't backing down. Not anymore. The phone buzzed again, and this time Evelyn didn't hesitate. She opened the message, and it was from Holly. The words made Evelyn's chest tighten. You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this. Evelyn almost laughed, but it was bitter. Holly's words were nothing more than another attempt to twist the narrative, to put Evelyn in the wrong, as if any of this had been her fault. She set the phone down, the message already dismissed. It didn't matter. Nothing they said could change the reality. The doorbell buzzed, pulling Evelyn from her thoughts. She walked to the door, expecting nothing more than the quiet of her home. But there, on the porch, was a package, a small, unmarked box. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She'd been expecting this too, some final, desperate gesture. She didn't touch the box. She simply stood in the doorway, staring at it, letting it linger in the silence between her and Frank. Frank took a step toward her, his voice calm. What are you going to do with it? Evelyn turned to him, her expression unreadable. Nothing. I've had enough of their games. With that, she closed the door. The finality of the gesture was its own kind of victory. There would be no more games, no more pretending, no more playing into their hands. Evelyn sat down, the weight of the day settling in her bones. The world outside felt distant now, as if it had nothing to do with her anymore. She had made her peace. The power had shifted back to her hands. One last message buzzed on her phone. It was from Lena. I'm sorry they did that. I'm on your side, Mom. Evelyn's heart clenched. The brief flicker of warmth that Lena's message brought was enough to steady her. She wasn't completely alone, and that was enough for now. She stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone down. The final piece had fallen into place. Everything was moving forward, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt the sting of her past begin to fade. The game was over, and Evelyn had won. Evelyn stepped into the small, sterile office of the police station, the familiar scent of coffee and old paper filling the air. It wasn't the first time she'd been here, but it felt different today. Today, she wasn't just a concerned citizen. Today, she was taking action. Detective Thompson, a sharp woman in her 40s, greeted her with a firm handshake. Mrs. Barrett, let's get started. Evelyn took a seat across from the detective, her hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Thompson slid a notebook in front of her, pen poised. Tell me what happened. Evelyn didn't hesitate. I came home early from a trip and found my son Joel and his wife Holly trying to break into my house. They had tools in hand, clearly attempting to force entry. Thompson nodded, her gaze unwavering. She didn't interrupt as Evelyn spoke, but her eyes were sharp, focused. I caught them on camera, Evelyn continued, her voice steady. I've already forwarded the footage to the department. Thompson's eyes flicked to the computer screen, where the video would be loaded. Let's take a look. Evelyn handed over the flash drive with the footage. Thompson inserted it into the computer and the video began to play. The grainy footage showed Joel, hunched over the door, struggling with a lockpick. Holly hovered beside him, anxiously scanning the street, whispering urgent instructions. Evelyn watched it all. The anger she'd felt earlier now replaced by a quiet sense of certainty. This was it. The truth was undeniable. The detective paused the video. "They didn't know you had this, did they?" Thompson said, her voice low. "No," Evelyn replied. "They thought they had time." The detective rewound the footage, then played it again. She made notes, her face impassive, but the weight of the situation clearly wasn't lost on her. "This is clear evidence of attempted unlawful entry," Thompson said, tapping her pen against the desk. "Their timeline falls apart the moment the footage starts." Evelyn nodded, a small flicker of relief in her chest. This was what she had been waiting for. The proof, the final piece that would shut down their lies, once and for all. Thompson looked up at her, her expression softening slightly. "We'll file the report immediately. I'll assign a case number. This will be in the system by the end of the day." Evelyn watched as the detective typed up the incident report. The case was officially open. There was no going back for Joel and Holly now. Their actions were on record. Irrefutable. "Do you want to press charges?" Thompson asked, looking up from her notes. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "Yes. I want them to understand that this isn't just about breaking into my house. This is about everything they've done. The manipulation, the years of overstepping boundaries. They need to face the consequences." Thompson nodded. "Understood. We'll take care of the legal proceedings. With the evidence you've provided, there's no question they'll be held accountable." Evelyn felt a hard sense of resolve settle over her. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just about protecting her property. It was about reclaiming her life. The years of tolerance, of bending to their will, had led her here. But now the power was back in her hands. "I'll file the trust updates alongside this," Dana had told her earlier, and Evelyn knew the legal steps would follow quickly. But for now, she could feel a shift. It wasn't over, but it had begun. The detective gathered the papers, preparing to finalize the report. Evelyn stood, her movements calm but firm. As she turned to leave, Thompson's voice followed her. "We'll keep you updated, Mrs. Barrett. We'll take it from here." Evelyn walked out of the station, her steps steady, the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders, but her mind clear. The next chapter was about to begin, and she wasn't looking back. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, the quiet hum of the house surrounding her. The police report was already filed, the footage sent, and yet she knew this wasn't over. The first email came shortly after lunch, a message from Joel's attorney, Harold Sterling. Evelyn didn't need to open it to know what it said. She had been expecting this. As she clicked on the message, her suspicion was confirmed. Sterling claimed that Joel had a key to her house and had only been checking on the property during her absence. The letter went on to explain that any attempt to enter was simply a misunderstanding. Evelyn's fingers clenched around the edge of the table. The lies were as expected. Joel always had a way of twisting the truth, but this was different. She was ready. With a calm, deliberate motion, Evelyn forwarded the email to Dana. Along with it, she attached still images from the footage, clear pictures of Joel using a lockpick, and the distinct marks of forced entry on the door. The timestamp on each image made the truth undeniable. She added a simple note. "For the record, this will make his claim fall apart." Her fingers lingered on the keyboard, a brief flicker of satisfaction passing through her. The evidence was airtight. Joel and Holly had underestimated her, just as they always had. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a new post from Holly. Evelyn clicked on it, and her stomach tightened. Holly had posted a veiled insinuation about Evelyn's health, suggesting that her mind wasn't sharp anymore. "Sad to see how age affects the mind," the post read. "I hope she gets the help she needs soon." Evelyn stared at the message, feeling a cold rush of anger. But it wasn't the first time Holly had tried to manipulate the narrative. This time, she wasn't letting it slide. With one swift motion, Evelyn took a screenshot of the post. She knew Frank would be saving it for the record. He was already working behind the scenes, capturing every post, every attempt to twist the truth. The law would make sure they couldn't escape. Evelyn set the phone down with a quiet exhale, the anger ebbing away. She wouldn't let their games distract her. This was just the beginning. She had to stay focused. Her attention shifted to the stack of legal documents on the table. She had been putting this off, but now felt like the right moment. She pulled out the updated medical power of attorney documents. She'd already cut Joel out of the trust. Now, she would do the same with the rest of her life. Joel would have no say in her health, no control over her decisions. Not anymore. She signed the documents with calm precision, each stroke of the pen a finality. The power was shifting back into her hands. Joel had wanted control. He had tried to manipulate her at every turn, but now, that control was gone. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Holly. It was Lena. "I believe you, Mom. I'm sorry they did that." Evelyn's heart caught in her chest. Lena's message was a quiet acknowledgement, one that made Evelyn's breath catch in her throat. She hadn't expected it, not like this. Lena had been torn between her parents and Evelyn for so long, but now, with this simple text, it was clear. Her daughter had chosen her side. A warmth spread through Evelyn, mingling with the exhaustion she felt. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone. It wasn't everything. Her family was fractured, and it would never be the same, but it was something, and it was enough. She put the phone down, a sense of resolve washing over her. The weight of the day, the weight of the choices she'd made, settled into place. There was no turning back. She had drawn the line, and there was no room for excuses anymore. Evelyn stood up, a sense of purpose now driving her forward. This wasn't just about protecting her property. This was about reclaiming her life, her peace, her future. And there was nothing left for Joel or Holly to take. Evelyn stood at the window, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into the horizon. The street outside was quiet, the sounds of evening settling over her suburban neighborhood. She could hear the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant hum of traffic. But within her, everything was still. Her phone buzzed on the table, but she didn't reach for it. She knew who it was. Joel, again. His name was a constant in the last few days, like a shadow she couldn't shake. It didn't matter. She was done. She had already made her choice. A knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. It was quick, then a pause, and then another knock, stronger, more insistent. She could feel the faint buzz of tension in the air. The kind that always came when someone was trying to force their way into a space they had no right to be. Her heart didn't race, not anymore. She didn't even feel anger, just a cold certainty. She didn't have to answer the door. She didn't have to open it. The knock came again, louder now, followed by Joel's voice. "Mom, it's me. Open up. We need to talk." Evelyn's gaze never wavered from the door. Her body was steady, no flicker of hesitation. The door that had once been a place of entry, of connection, now felt like a barrier, and that's how it needed to stay. She had already made her decision, and nothing he could say would change it. The knock came again, more frantic this time, followed by Joel's pleading. "Please, Mom, you don't understand. We can fix this. Open the door." Evelyn stood still. She wasn't afraid. There was nothing left for them to take from her. Her fingers brushed the phone on the table, but she didn't pick it up. It buzzed again. Another message from Joel. She didn't need to read it. She had already blocked him. Her hand remained steady. No more excuses, no more manipulation. This time, there would be no forgiveness, no more second chances. Not from him, not from Holly. Frank's voice came from behind her. He's still out there, isn't he? Evelyn nodded, though she didn't turn. He's not the son I thought I knew. Frank stepped into the room, watching her closely. You've made your choice, Evelyn, and it's the right one. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Frank had been with her through it all. The late nights, the phone calls, the endless manipulation. He understood. And more than that, he respected her decision. The knocking stopped, but the tension lingered. Evelyn could hear Joel's voice again, muffled through the door. Mom, please. You're making a mistake. For a long moment, Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. Joel had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This wasn't about a mistake. This was about trust. And trust was something they had shattered. I've changed the security codes, Evelyn said quietly. They won't be able to get in again. Frank nodded, a silent reassurance. She was doing what needed to be done. She was taking back control. The air was still, the weight of the decision settling over her. She had no regrets. She wasn't looking back anymore. Evelyn turned away from the door and walked toward the window. From here, she could see Joel standing in the yard, frustration written across his face. But she didn't feel pity. She only felt a quiet, hard certainty. He had made his choices, just as she had made hers. Frank stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You've done the right thing. No one can take that away from you. Evelyn didn't respond, but she didn't need to. She knew. The game had changed, and this time, it was her who was in control. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the door behind her stayed closed. The past was behind her now, and she wasn't about to open it again. The courtroom was colder than Evelyn expected. Bright fluorescent lights, polished floors that echoed every footstep, and rows of wooden benches that seemed deliberately uncomfortable. The air held a quiet tension, the kind that settled into bones and refused to leave. She sat beside Dana at the petitioner's table, hands folded neatly, gaze forward, steady. Across the aisle, Joel hunched in his chair, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Holly sat beside him, her expression a mix of defiance and forced fragility. They didn't look at Evelyn, not directly, but she could feel their eyes drifting toward her whenever they thought she wouldn't notice. The bailiff called the case, and the judge entered, the room rising to its feet. When everyone sat again, Evelyn felt the weight of the moment settle fully across her shoulders. This was it, the point of no return. Joel's attorney was the first to speak. Harold Sterling stood confidently, buttoning his suit jacket as he addressed the court. His voice carried smoothly across the room, rehearsed and polished. Your Honor, my client was simply checking on his mother's home while she was traveling. He used a key he believed he was still authorized to possess. Any implication of attempted forced entry is a misunderstanding, exaggerated during an emotionally charged moment. Evelyn sat still, her expression unreadable. A misunderstanding. The words sliced through her like a knife, cold and familiar. Joel had always been good at rewriting reality, twisting it until he looked like the victim. Dana leaned forward, her voice cool and sharp as steel when she stood. Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary. Multiple security camera angles capturing the incident, time-stamped and supported by still images documenting clear forced entry marks on the doorframe. We also have logs of unauthorized attempts to access security codes and statements from a direct eyewitness. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge's bench. The courtroom stayed silent as the judge flipped through the first pages, the faint rustle of paper the only sound. Sterling lifted his chin slightly. With respect, the footage is being taken out of context. My client was dealing with significant family stress and simply wanted to ensure his mother's property was safe. Dana didn't flinch. If he had been authorized, he wouldn't have used lock-picking tools. And his wife wouldn't have been recorded saying, Grab what matters first. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Holly stiffened visibly, her face blanching. Joel shot her a glare that could have cracked glass. The judge turned to Dana. Play the footage. The lights dimmed slightly as the video began on the monitor to the side. There it was. Joel on camera, hunched over Evelyn's front door, tools glinting in the porch light. Holly looking down the street, whispering urgently. The unmistakable scraping of metal against metal. The timestamp glowing in the corner. When the video ended, silence fell heavy and absolute. Holly was the first to break. "It was stress," she said, her voice trembling. We thought something was wrong with her. She hasn't been well, and we just..." The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Barrett appears quite capable of speaking for herself." Evelyn stood then, slowly, deliberately. Her voice was calm, steady, and clear. Not a tremor, not a hesitation. "My flight was canceled unexpectedly. I returned home early. When I arrived, I found them attempting to break into my house. They did not have a key. They did not have permission. They knew I wouldn't be home, and they planned to take what wasn't theirs." She paused, her gaze resting squarely on the judge. This wasn't an act of concern. This was an act of intent. The judge studied her, then turned back to Joel. "Mr. Barrett, can you explain the forced entry marks in these images?" Joel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He swallowed, tried again, but the words tangled in his throat. His face flushed a deep, furious red. Holly stared ahead rigidly, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The judge leaned back, expression sharp with skepticism. "Because from where I stand, this doesn't look like a misunderstanding. It looks like attempted unlawful entry, and video evidence is difficult to argue with." Evelyn sat again, pulse steady. She felt no triumph, just an anchored certainty, like steel settling into place. Dana placed a hand briefly on Evelyn's arm, a quiet signal. "We've got them." The judge gathered the papers, lifting her gaze. "My ruling will be issued shortly." The gavel struck, and Joel's eyes filled with something Evelyn had never seen in him before. Fear. Evelyn sat in the courtroom, the cool, crisp sheets of paper in front of her feeling heavier than ever. The judge had already read through the evidence, but now it was time for the final move. Dana stood at her side, poised with a file, ready to play the last card in the game. Joel and Holly sat across the room, their once confident posture now crumbling under the weight of the evidence. Holly's face was pale, her hands twisted in her lap, while Joel clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He had been defiant before, but now he was still, every inch of his body tense with the realization that this was the end. The room fell silent as Dana rose, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. She moved to the judge's bench, sliding the newly filed trust and deed documents toward the judge with a quiet, deliberate motion. The pages seemed to glimmer under the fluorescent lights, the reality of what they represented hanging thick in the air. "These," Dana began, her voice cool, "are the newly filed trust and deed documents, Your Honor. They reflect Mrs. Barrett's full legal authority over her assets, as well as the irrevocable changes made to her estate. The trust updates were filed prior to this hearing, ensuring there is no question regarding her intentions or control." The judge glanced down at the documents, flipping through the pages slowly, scrutinizing every word. Evelyn watched her closely, waiting for the inevitable reaction. The judge's brow furrowed slightly as she processed the new legal framework that had been put in place. Evelyn knew this moment was crucial, the final confirmation of her authority. After a few moments, the judge set the papers down with a slight exhale, her eyes meeting Evelyn's across the room. "Mrs. Barrett's intentions are now clear," she said, her voice firm. "And this court recognizes her full legal right to determine the future of her estate." Evelyn didn't flinch. She had been waiting for this, working toward it for years. But hearing the judge confirm it, seeing it reflected in the courtroom, was different. It was the moment her life would change permanently, and it felt like freedom. Joel's mouth opened, but no words came out. He shifted in his seat, his face reddening with a mix of confusion and anger. Holly, sitting beside him, whispered something in his ear, but it was clear they were grasping for anything they could hold on to. The judge's eyes never left Evelyn. "Mr. Barrett, Mrs. Barrett's legal authority is indisputable. The documents filed today confirm the irrevocable removal of you both from any claim to her estate. Your arguments no longer stand." Holly's lips trembled, her earlier attempt to appear confident now shattered. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't fair," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You can't just take everything from us. She's our family." Evelyn remained calm, her gaze fixed on Holly. She wasn't surprised. It had always been about money and control for them. But now, the game was over. The judge's voice was sharp. "Mrs. Barrett has the right to decide who is part of her life and who isn't. You've had your chances. Now, this court will only consider the facts." Lena, who had been sitting quietly in the back, shifted in her seat. Evelyn caught her gaze for a moment. Lena's eyes were downcast, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Evelyn knew her daughter's heart was torn. She had been stuck between them for too long. But the message had been clear. There was no room for manipulation, no room for excuses. Evelyn had to let go of the past. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating as the judge turned her attention back to the documents before her. "I'll review these documents and the statements made here today," she said, her voice measured. "The final ruling will be scheduled shortly." Evelyn felt a weight settle in her chest, one she hadn't realized she was carrying. This was it. The fight was over. The judge rose from her chair, signaling the end of the hearing. "Court is adjourned. The final ruling will be issued within the next few days." As the room emptied, Evelyn remained seated, the words hanging in the air. The fight wasn't over, but the war was won. Joel and Holly's arguments had crumbled under the weight of truth and legality. There was nothing left for them to take. Frank leaned in, his voice low. "You did it, Evelyn. It's done." Evelyn looked at him, her face unreadable. "Not yet," she said quietly, "but it will be." The courtroom was quieter than Evelyn expected when the judge finally entered. The murmur of voices that had filled the room before her arrival was replaced by an anxious silence. It was over. She had done everything she could to prepare for this moment. But now, as the judge made her way to the bench, the weight of it all settled heavily on her shoulders. Joel and Holly were seated across from her, their postures stiff, but they weren't looking at her anymore. They were staring at the judge, waiting, hoping for the outcome that they now knew would never come. The judge's gaze swept over the room before settling on the documents in front of her. She paused for a moment, then spoke in a calm, authoritative voice. "I have reviewed the materials submitted, including the footage, witness testimony, and the legal documentation provided by Mrs. Barrett's attorney. Based on the evidence before me, I find in favor of Mrs. Barrett." The words hit the air with an undeniable finality. Joel stiffened beside Holly, but there was no protest. There was nothing left to say. The judge continued, her voice cutting through the stillness. "I grant Mrs. Barrett a protective order for her property. Furthermore, I confirm her legal right to restructure her estate. Joel and Holly Barrett are hereby denied any future claims to her property, assets, or any portion of her estate." Evelyn's breath caught in her chest for a moment. She had been preparing for this, but hearing it confirmed aloud, knowing it was finally real, was a different kind of release. It felt like the last piece of her old life had crumbled away. And in its place, she could see the future taking shape. A future where she was in control, where she didn't have to look over her shoulder. The judge glanced over the room one last time, her expression unyielding. This ruling is final. There will be no further appeals. Court is adjourned. The gavel slammed down, echoing through the room. For a moment, everything stood still. The air was thick with the weight of the decision. Then, slowly, Joel and Holly stood, their faces flushed with anger and frustration. Neither one of them said anything. They didn't have to. The defeat was evident in their every movement. Evelyn didn't move at first. She just stayed seated, her hands resting on the table in front of her. She had expected this, yes, but now that it had actually happened, the relief was overwhelming. She could feel it in her bones. This sense of freedom, of finality. Frank, standing at her side, leaned in. "It's done, Evelyn. You've won." Evelyn nodded slowly, her lips pressed together in a tight line. She didn't need to say anything. She felt it all in the calmness of her breath, the steadiness of her pulse. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing hanging over her. The room began to empty as the hearing concluded. Joel and Holly left with as much dignity as they could muster, but Evelyn knew their defeat was complete. They would never have access to her again, not her home, not her assets, not her life. As she stood and gathered her things, her phone buzzed. She picked it up without hesitation. It was a text from Lena. "I'm glad you're okay." The simple message cut through the tension, and Evelyn's heart softened just a little. She had been uncertain about Lena's position, about where her daughter's loyalty would lie, but this small gesture, told Evelyn everything she needed to know. Her fingers lingered on the screen, and for the first time in days, a genuine smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. Frank, seeing the smile, nodded approvingly. "You've earned this." Evelyn nodded, her gaze steady. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew that. There would be challenges. But for the first time in years, she wasn't walking it alone. And more than that, she was walking it on her terms. As she stepped out of the courthouse, the world seemed a little quieter, a little more peaceful. The future, uncertain as it was now hers to shape, and for the first time, Evelyn was ready. The office was still, save for the sound of the pen scratching across paper. Evelyn sat at the sleek wooden desk, Dana at her side, watching the legal documents in front of her with quiet authority. The room felt smaller than usual, intimate even, as if everything had been reduced to this moment, this final act. Joel and Holly were gone, their arguments futile in the wake of the judge's decision. But this moment, this signing, would seal it all. No more manipulation, no more chances, no more pretending. Evelyn's hand hovered over the papers, the weight of them heavier than she'd anticipated. She had known this was coming, but now that she was here, it felt final. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The future was hers to shape, and there would be no looking back. She looked at Dana, whose eyes held the same quiet resolve. Dana had been a constant through this all, her calm, legal precision, the one steady hand she could rely on. "Whenever you're ready," Dana said, her voice measured but kind, encouraging. Evelyn's fingers brushed the pen, the final instrument that would give her control. With a firm motion, she signed the first page, Joel fully disinherited. The words were clear, written in black ink, and as the pen moved across the page, Evelyn could almost feel the last remnants of her old life fall away. There would be no future claims from Joel, no inheritance, no access to the life she had built. He had chosen his path, and now it was over. The next page, Holly removed from all medical and financial permissions, followed. Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly as she signed, but her hand was steady. Holly, too, had crossed a line that could never be undone. She wasn't just a distant relative anymore. She was an enemy, one who had manipulated and schemed, using her position as a daughter-in-law to push for what wasn't hers. The last page held Lena's name. Lena becomes the sole future beneficiary. Evelyn paused, her breath catching for a moment. She thought of her daughter, the girl who had been caught in the crossfire, torn between loyalty and love. But in the end, Lena had made her choice, just as Evelyn had. She had believed in her mother, and now Evelyn could believe in her too. She signed the final document, her signature sharp and decisive, with no lingering hesitation. This was her legacy, her decision, and no one would take it from her. Dana collected the signed documents, carefully placing them in a manila folder, her movements precise, practiced. She turned to the next step. These will be filed with the court immediately. I'll lock the originals in my vault for safekeeping. Evelyn nodded, her hands resting in her lap now, still as the calm after a storm. She felt no joy, no triumph, but a quiet peace. A clarity that had been missing for so long. The future was now hers to shape, and it was unshackled from the past. Frank stepped forward, holding a small black safe in his hands. He opened it, placing the folder of signed documents inside with deliberate care. He closed the lid, locking it with a final, metallic click. "It's done, Evelyn," Frank said softly, meeting her gaze. "There's nothing left for them to take." Evelyn exhaled slowly. The weight of the years had been lifted from her shoulders, and with it came a quiet confidence. "It's done," she echoed, the words carrying the full weight of everything that had led to this moment. As she stood, her hand resting on the desk for support, she felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of control, of clarity. There would be no more looking over her shoulder, no more fears of betrayal. The future, uncertain as it was hers. Evelyn was sitting on the porch, the cool evening breeze brushing through the oak trees, when she saw Lena walking slowly up the driveway. Her daughter's figure was small and hesitant, as if unsure whether she belonged here, unsure if the distance between them had been permanently bridged. Evelyn's heart gave a small flutter, a rush of concern mixed with the weight of everything they had both been through. But this moment, this was different. It had to be different. Lena stopped at the base of the steps, her eyes red, a small tear slipping down her cheek. "Mom?" Her voice broke, raw and unguarded. Evelyn stood, her body moving almost instinctively toward her daughter. The distance between them was shorter now, but it still felt immense. Lena's grief was palpable, but so was her longing for something she had lost: trust, connection, and maybe the feeling that family was something to hold on to. "I'm so sorry," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For what they did. And for not seeing it sooner." Evelyn's hand found Lena's arm gently, her touch steady. "You don't have to apologize for them, Lena. You're not responsible for what your father and Holly did." Lena collapsed into her mother's arms, the weight of everything she had been carrying spilling over. "I should have done something. I should have known." Her voice trailed off, her sobs quiet but heavy. Evelyn held her, her heart breaking in a way she didn't expect. She had always protected Lena, always shielded her from the worst of the world, but now she saw the depth of her daughter's hurt. And though the betrayal of Joel and Holly still stung, she knew this was part of the healing. "You're here now," Evelyn said softly, rubbing Lena's back in slow, soothing circles. "That's all that matters. You've made your choice, and I believe in you. Don't carry their weight anymore. It's not yours to bear." Lena pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes, offering a shaky but grateful smile. The years of tension and confusion between them felt like they were starting to lift, if only for a moment. But it was a start. Frank stepped out of the house, carrying a tray with 2 glasses of lemonade. The familiar sight of him, so calm and steady, brought a brief sense of normalcy to the moment. He set the tray down on the table between them with a soft clink. "I thought you two might need a break," Frank said, his eyes kind but observant. He sat down beside Evelyn, a quiet acceptance in his movements. He had been her constant through the chaos, her steady hand, and his calm presence helped ease the weight of the day. Lena nodded slowly and took a glass, sipping it quietly. She didn't speak much after that, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the space between them was being filled with something new, something healing. Evelyn glanced at the life binder beside her, the one she had spent weeks updating with new instructions. It was everything: her will, medical directives, and the final version of what she wanted for her life. Now that the weight of the past was behind her, she had always kept it in the drawer, tucked away for safekeeping, but now she knew it was time to put it in a safer place, a place where no one could ever threaten it again. Later that day, after Lena had left, Evelyn took a trip to the hardware store. The sun was low in the sky as she stood in front of the security section, scanning the options. She chose the strongest deadbolt they had, reinforced and nearly indestructible. It wasn't just about protection, it was symbolic. A reminder that she had control, that her space, her life, was her own. When she returned home, she installed the new deadbolt herself. The work was methodical, a quiet meditation. Each turn of the wrench tightened her grip on the future she was creating. When the final click sounded, she stood back and surveyed her work. The door was sealed, secure, and locked. It was done. As she stepped away from the door, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dana, confirming the final legal documents. The trust was complete, the estate protected, and no one could touch it. Evelyn took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling slowly, the full weight of the day settling in. Her life was now unshackled, and for the first time in years, she felt steady. She wasn't looking over her shoulder anymore. There would be no more surprises. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the stillness of her home wash over her. The world was quieter now, and for the first time, Evelyn could feel the peace that had been so elusive. The future, uncertain as it might be, was hers to shape, and this time she was ready. The art gallery buzzed with the hum of voices and the soft clink of wine glasses. The walls were lined with Lena's work, her canvases bright with emotion, bold with color. Evelyn moved through the space slowly, her heart swelling with pride at every piece. She could see Lena's soul in each stroke, her fears, her triumphs, the journey she had taken. It was raw and beautiful, the work of a girl who had found her voice in the chaos. Lena was beside her, explaining a piece to a small group of people, her hands moving animatedly, her voice steady. It was clear how much this moment meant to her, how much she had overcome to stand here in front of an audience, her work now on display. It was a far cry from the quiet, unsure girl Evelyn had once known. Evelyn took a step back, giving her daughter space to shine. But she couldn't help the pride that washed over her. This was the future, the one she had fought for. Not the toxic web of manipulation spun by Joel and Holly, but the bright, unshackled future Lena was now building. She glanced toward the back of the room. Joel and Holly were standing in the corner, their figures isolated from the rest of the crowd. They had come, of course, Lena's parents after all, but they didn't belong here. Not anymore. Their presence, forced and awkward, was a stark contrast to the warmth and life that filled the space. Their eyes were scanning the room, but not for any kind of connection. They were waiting, hoping perhaps, to reclaim what they had lost. But there was nothing left for them here. Joel's gaze met hers briefly across the room, a fleeting moment of recognition. His jaw tightened as he looked away, his posture stiff with frustration. His world had crumbled, and he knew it. He had no claim on Lena's success, no claim on the family that was growing strong without him. No more control, no more manipulation. Evelyn watched him for a long moment, her heart steady, her thoughts calm. She had no sympathy for him. His choices had led him here, isolated and powerless. She didn't even feel anger anymore. He had shown his true colors, and the price was this: exclusion. The future he had once expected was gone, erased by his own hands. Lena finished her explanation and made her way over to Evelyn, a soft smile on her lips. "Mom, thank you for coming," she said, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. Evelyn opened her arms and Lena stepped into the embrace, holding her tightly. The warmth of the moment was overwhelming. In that brief, quiet space, there was no past, no betrayals. Just the two of them, surrounded by art and life, a new chapter unfolding. As they pulled apart, Dana approached them, holding a manila envelope in her hands. Her expression was calm, but there was a flicker of something. Perhaps pride, perhaps relief. She handed the envelope to Evelyn with a brief nod. "These are the certified copies of the completed trust," Dana said. Her voice was as steady as ever, but Evelyn could hear the subtle weight in her words. It was done. They were safe. The future, now fully in her hands, was irrevocable. Evelyn nodded, accepting the envelope, but she didn't open it. She didn't need to. She could already feel the finality in her chest. Joel, still at the back of the room, shifted uncomfortably. His gaze darted around, then back to Evelyn, but he didn't approach. He knew the truth now. He had lost it all: his access to the estate, his control over Lena, his place in this family. The realization hit him like a cold wave. As Evelyn and Lena moved toward the exit, Evelyn felt the weight of the day shift. They were leaving behind a past of lies and manipulation, stepping into a future of truth and love. She could feel the weight of the papers in her hand, the official seal that had confirmed her autonomy. But it wasn't about the documents. It was about the life that was now possible. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Evelyn looked down at Lena, her heart full. "My flight was canceled," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Their access was too. And with that, she walked forward, steady and proud, into the future.